On December 20th, my phone buzzed while I was standing at my kitchen counter separating eggs for my annual pound ache. The message was from my daughter-in-law, Brittany. "We're not celebrating Christmas with you this year. We don't need you." I stared at it long enough for my hands to go still, not because I didn't believe she could say it, because I could hear her voice as I read it, bright, smug, certain I'd do what I always did. Apologize for existing offer money and beg for another chance to be tolerated. I'm Diane Mercer. I'm 72, and for 7 straight Christmases, I'd been the one who made the holiday happen for my son Kyle and his wife. The flights, the groceries, the gifts, the last-minute emergencies. The mom, we're short again. The mom, can you cover it just this once? And the part that made my stomach twist. Every year they acted like my help was some cute little tradition, like I enjoyed being treated as a holiday cash machine. I took a breath, smiled like I was talking to a cashier, and typed back one word: cool. Then I added the second line, the one that made Brittany stop breathing for a second. Then tomorrow's signing is canceled and my attorney is freezing every account you've been using. I hit send and set my phone face down. Before I tell you what happened next, I want to ask you something. Where are you watching this from right now? Drop your city or country in the comments. And what time is it where you are? I'm curious how far these stories travel. While you're down there, hit that like button if you've ever felt used by someone who was supposed to love you. And if you want to hear how this played out, make sure you subscribe, because this story gets wild. Now back to what Brittany didn't know. She didn't know what I'd already set in motion, and she definitely didn't know what would happen 24 hours later. Let me explain what tomorrow's signing meant. My husband Frank passed away 6 years ago. We weren't rich in the way people imagine rich. We were steady, careful. Frank owned a small commercial roofing company in Phoenix, and I handled the books. When he died, I sold the business and rolled the proceeds into boring investments. A few rentals, and the home I live in now in Scottsdale, a home worth about $1.1 million to you. I also had a trust set up, not because I'm fancy, because after you watch one friend's kids tear her apart over a will, you stop being sentimental about paperwork. A year ago, my son Kyle started pushing me to simplify things. He said it with that careful voice adult children use when they're trying to sound mature while steering you exactly where they want you. Mom estate planning is stressful. Brittany found this great attorney. It's just paperwork. We should put Kyle on the title. Make it easier later. I didn't want to. My gut didn't want to. But Kyle had that old look, half pleading, half irritated, like I was being difficult for making him wait. So I agreed to meet with my attorney, Mr. Harland, on December 21st. I wasn't even signing over my house. I was signing a document that would let Kyle assist with some administrative tasks if I was ever hospitalized. Boring, limited, safe. Or so I thought. Because 3 weeks earlier, I'd noticed something off. Not in their tone, not in their manners. Brittany has never been warm, so I can't say her behavior suddenly changed. I noticed it in the money. I keep a spreadsheet for my rentals. I check everything. Frank trained me to watch every dime. And I saw charges on a card I barely used anymore. A boutique in Dallas, a spa package, a catered tasting, a deposit labeled event services. At first, I assumed it was fraud. Then I remembered I'd given Kyle access to one card months ago, when he said their bank app was down and he needed to pay for groceries for the week. I called him casually. No accusations, just, "Hey, did you use my card for something? I'm seeing charges I don't recognize." He didn't hesitate. "Yeah, Mom. Brittany put a few things on it. She was going to tell you, it's for Christmas." I waited for the punchline. There wasn't one. What things, I asked. Decor, some gifts. And a deposit, he said, already defensive. "We're doing a bigger Christmas this year, remember, for the family. It's not a big deal. A bigger Christmas." That's what they called it when Brittany wanted to impress people who didn't care about her. And that's when The quiet part of me, the part I used to ignore, sat up and said, if they're comfortable taking without asking now, they'll take more the moment they can. So I did something I hadn't done in years. I didn't confront them. I watched. I asked my bank for a full list of authorized users and access points. I asked my attorney what documents Kyle had requested. I installed 2 small cameras outside my front door, and I scheduled a private meeting with Mr. Harland without telling my son. In that meeting, Mr. Harland looked me dead in the eye and said, Diane, I'm going to be blunt. Someone has been trying to position themselves to control your finances. Then he slid a printed email across the desk. It was from the great attorney Brittany had recommended. It included an attachment titled Guardianship Evaluation Checklist. I didn't need a dramatic soundtrack to understand what that meant. They weren't trying to help me. They were preparing to take over. And now on December 20th, Brittany had just gifted me the perfect excuse to cut the cord without apology. The first sign she'd read my second line came 10 seconds later. My phone started ringing. Brittany, then Kyle, then Brittany again. I let it ring. I went back to my eggs. I poured flour. I turned the mixer on and let the noise fill my kitchen like armor. When I finally picked up, I didn't say hello. Brittany didn't either. What do you mean you're freezing accounts? She demanded. Her voice wasn't angry yet. It was startled, like someone who just stepped off a curb and realized the car actually wasn't stopping. I mean exactly what I wrote, I said calmly. You told me you don't need me, so you won't be using my money. Kyle jumped in voice tight. Mom, Brittany didn't mean it like that. She texted it, I said. It's hard to misinterpret text. Brittany made a small laugh, the kind of laugh that tries to turn consequences into a joke. Okay, Diane, relax. We're just doing Christmas our way. You always make it about you. I held the phone away from my ear for a second and looked at it like it had grown teeth. Interesting, I said, because I wasn't the one who wrote, "We don't need you." Kyle tried again. Mom, we just wanted something simpler, less stress. Then you'll love what I've done, I replied. I've simplified everything. Starting now. Brittany's voice sharpened. You can't do that. We've already paid deposits with my card, I said. Silence. Kyle exhaled like I'd slapped him in public. Mom, come on. It was going to be a surprise. A surprise would be flowers. I said, this was theft. Then Brittany snapped, you're being dramatic. Nobody stole anything. Kyle has permission. Kyle had permission to buy groceries, I said, not to fund your social plans. Kyle's voice softened dangerously soft. Mom, are you feeling okay? Because this isn't like you. There it was, not concern. The setup. I smiled. I'm feeling fantastic. And I'm especially glad you asked, because my attorney will be thrilled to hear you're already planting that story. Kyle went quiet. Brittany didn't. You're punishing us because you didn't get invited, she hissed. No, I said, I'm protecting myself because you invited yourself to my money. Then I ended the call. That night I slept better than I had in weeks. Not because it felt good, because it felt clear. At 7 in the morning on December 21st, I woke up to 17 missed calls. I didn't return a single one. Instead, I made coffee, sat at my kitchen table, and opened the file I'd been building for 3 weeks. Bank statements, credit card records, text message screenshots, receipts from Christmases past that I'd kept because Frank always told me the same thing. Paper doesn't lie, people do. And as I flipped through them, I realized something that should have been obvious years ago. Christmas hadn't been a holiday in my family for a long time. It had been a transaction, and I'd been too afraid of losing my son to admit I was being used. Let me take you back so you understand how it started. The first Christmas after Frank died, Kyle called me in early November. His voice was careful, like he was stepping around broken glass. Mom, I know this year is hard. Brittany and I were thinking maybe we could host, give you a break. You shouldn't have to cook and plan everything alone. I was grateful. I was drowning in grief, and the idea of not carrying the weight of a holiday sounded like mercy. So I said yes. 2 weeks later, Kyle called again. Mom, quick question. The caterer needs a deposit. Can you cover it? We'll pay you back after Christmas. I didn't hesitate. I sent the money. It was $800. I told myself it was a gift. That's what mothers do. They never paid me back. The next year, it was the flights. Mom tickets are crazy expensive this season. Can you book ours? We'll Venmo you. The Venmo never came. The year after that, it was the gifts. Mom, we're a little tight this month. Can you grab a few things for the kids? Just this once became every single time. And somewhere along the way, I stopped being a mother they wanted to see. I became the budget line that made their version of Christmas possible. But here's the part that makes my chest tighten even now. I didn't just pay for things. I absorbed the guilt they wrapped around every request. Mom, everyone else's parents help out. Mom, we're trying to give the kids a good Christmas. Don't you want that, Mom? It's not like you're spending it on anything else. That last one came from Brittany 2 years ago, and it landed like a slap, because what she meant was, you're alone, you're old, and your money might as well go to people who matter. I didn't argue. I wrote the check because I was terrified that if I said no, they'd stop calling altogether. And the sad truth, I was right. The moment I started asking questions about the charges this year, the tone shifted. Kyle got defensive. Brittany got cold. And suddenly, I wasn't a generous mother. I was controlling, paranoid, difficult. When I first noticed the charges 3 weeks ago, I told myself maybe I was overreacting. Maybe Brittany really was planning something nice. Maybe I was being unfair. So I tested it. I didn't accuse. I didn't demand answers. I just asked Kyle casually, "Hey, did you use my card for something? I'm seeing charges I don't recognize." And when he said, "Yeah, Mom," Brittany put a few things on it. She was going to tell you, "It's for Christmas." I waited for him to say the next part, the part that mattered. "We'll pay you back." He never said it. Instead, he said, "It's not a big deal. Not a big deal." As if I hadn't spent 7 years funding their version of family while being excluded from the actual moments. As if I hadn't been the one writing checks while they posted pictures of their perfect holiday with me cropped out of the frame. I stayed quiet on that call. I didn't push. I just said, "Okay, thanks for letting me know." But inside, something shifted, because I realized that if I confronted them directly, they'd do what they always did. They'd apologize just enough to make me feel guilty for being upset. They'd promise to do better. And then, 6 months later, it would happen again. So instead of arguing, I decided to do something I should have done years ago. I decided to verify everything. I went to my bank and requested a full breakdown of every account Kyle had access to. I asked for timestamps, amounts, and locations of every charge. I didn't tell Kyle I was doing it. I didn't tell anyone. I also pulled up old bank statements going back 3 years. I wanted to see the pattern in black and white. And when I laid them out on my dining room table, the picture was clear. Every November, the charges started. Small at first, a dinner here, a purchase there. Then, as December approached, they grew. Deposits, event services, boutique purchases, spa packages, and every January the requests stopped. The calls became less frequent, the texts shorter. I wasn't their mother. I was their seasonal funding source. The hardest part wasn't the money. It was realizing how long I'd let it happen. How many times I'd swallowed my suspicion because I didn't want to be the mother who caused problems. The mother who made things awkward. The mother who got left behind. But as I sat there on the morning of December 21st, staring at my phone lighting up with call after call, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Clarity. Brittany's text the day before, the one that said, "We don't need you," hadn't broken me. It had freed me. because the moment she put it in writing, she'd given me permission to stop pretending to stop funding a relationship that only existed when my wallet was open. And now, with my attorney's words echoing in my head, someone has been trying to position themselves to control your finances. I understood the stakes. This wasn't just about Christmas. This was about my future, my security, my ability to make my own decisions for however many years I had left. So I made a choice. I wasn't going to argue with them. I wasn't going to explain myself. I wasn't going to beg them to see my side. I was going to protect what was mine. And I was going to do it quietly, carefully, and completely. Because if there's one thing Frank taught me, it's this. When someone shows you who they are, believe them the first time. Brittany had shown me, and I'd finally started believing. The meeting with Mr. Harland had happened 4 days before Brittany sent that text. I hadn't told Kyle I was going. I hadn't mentioned it to anyone. I just drove to the office on a gray Tuesday afternoon, walked past the reception desk, and sat down across from the man who'd handled Frank's estate 6 years ago. Mr. Heron is in his mid-60s with the kind of steady voice that makes you feel like the room just got quieter. He's never been the type to sugarcoat things, which is exactly why Frank trusted him. When I called to schedule the meeting, I kept it vague. I just said I wanted to review some documents before the signing Kyle had been pushing for. Mr. Harland didn't ask questions. He just said, "Come in, let's talk." I brought everything with me. The bank statements, the credit card charges, the text from Kyle about simplifying things, and the name of the attorney Brittany had recommended. Mr. Harland spread the documents across his desk and studied them in silence for what felt like 10 minutes. Finally, he looked up at me. His expression was the kind you don't want to see from your lawyer. Serious, concerned, almost sad. "Diane," he said slowly, "I'm going to be blunt. Someone has been trying to position themselves to control your finances. I'd suspected it, but hearing it out loud in that quiet office made my stomach drop. How I asked. He tapped the paper in front of him. "This attorney Brittany recommended. I know him. He specializes in elder law, which sounds helpful until you realize what that actually means in cases like this. He helps families navigate guardianship, conservatorship, and financial decision-making for older adults. I'm not incapacitated," I said, my voice sharper than I intended. "I know Mr. Harland replied, but that's not the standard they use to start the process. They just need to establish concern, confusion, difficulty managing affairs. And once that narrative is planted, it's very hard to disprove." He slid another document toward me. It was an email printed and highlighted. The sender was the attorney Brittany had recommended. The subject line read, "Preliminary Assessment Materials." I scanned the attachment title, "Guardianship Evaluation Checklist." My hands went cold. "What does this mean?" I asked, even though I already knew. Mr. Harland leaned back in his chair. "It means someone was preparing to make a case that you need help making decisions, and the person they were positioning as your primary decision-maker wasn't Kyle." I stared at him. Who Brittany? The air went out of the room. I sat there trying to process what he just said. My son's wife. The woman who'd barely spoken to me outside of holiday logistics and funding requests. The woman who just texted me, "We don't need you," was trying to put herself in charge of my money, my property, my life. How is that even possible? I whispered. Mr. Harland's jaw tightened. The document Kyle wanted you to sign wasn't just about helping with administrative tasks if you were hospitalized. It included language that would give him limited power of attorney, and buried in the fine print was a clause allowing him to delegate authority to a spouse in the event he was unavailable. I felt my chest tighten. Kyle wouldn't agree to that. Mr. Harland didn't argue with me. He just said Kyle might not have read it carefully, or he might have been told it was standard, but Diane, the result is the same. If you'd signed that document, Brittany would have access. And once someone has access, it's much harder to take it back than it is to prevent it in the first place. I thought about all the little moments over the past year. The way Brittany always steered the conversation when Kyle and I talked about my finances. The way she'd insisted on the new attorney. The way she'd started talking about me like I was fragile, forgetful, overwhelmed. It hadn't been concern. It had been set up. What happens if I don't sign? I asked. Then nothing changes. Mr. Harlan said, "Your trust remains as it is. Your accounts remain under your control, and if Kyle or Brittany tries to escalate, we have documentation showing you were clear-headed, organized, and fully capable of managing your own affairs." I nodded slowly, and if I'd already signed, Mr. Harlan's silence said everything. I looked down at my hands. They were shaking not from fear, from anger, because I'd raised Kyle to be better than this. I'd taught him to be honest, to work hard, to stand on his own. And somewhere along the way, he'd stopped being the man I'd raised and started being the man Brittany needed him to be. Passive, agreeable, willing to look the other way, while she maneuvered behind the scenes. "What should I do?" I asked. Mr. Harlan folded his hands on the desk. "First, cancel the signing. Don't explain why, just cancel. Second, remove Kyle's access to anything financial. Cards, accounts, all of it. Third, document everything. Every text, every call, every request. And fourth, if they escalate, don't engage. Call me. They're going to be furious," I said. "Good," Mr. Harlan replied. "Fury is what happens when someone realizes they can't control you anymore." I left his office that day with a folder full of documents and a plan I hadn't fully admitted to myself yet. I was going to take back everything I'd let slip away. My money, my boundaries, my ability to say no without guilt. And I was going to do it before they had a chance to stop me. That night, I sat at my kitchen table and wrote down exactly what I needed to do. The bank, the cards, the accounts, the security questions, the access points. I made a list of every place Kyle's name appeared, every authorization I'd granted, because I trusted him, every permission I'd given because I didn't want to seem difficult. And I realized something that made my throat tighten. I hadn't been protecting myself. I'd been protecting his feelings. And in doing so, I'd made myself vulnerable to someone who didn't care about me at all. Brittany didn't see me as a person. She saw me as a resource. And Kyle had let her. That was the part that hurt the most. Not Brittany's cruelty, but Kyle's silence. Because a son who truly cared wouldn't have let it get this far. He would have stopped her the first time she suggested taking control. He would have protected me instead of enabling her. But he hadn't, and now I had to protect myself. The next morning, December 21st, I woke up early, dressed carefully, and prepared to do something I should have done the moment I first felt that whisper of doubt. I was going to close every door they'd been trying to open. And I was going to do it in a way that left no room for negotiation. Because if there's one thing I'd learned in 72 years, it's this. People will take as much as you let them. And the moment you stop letting them, they reveal exactly who they've been all along. I was ready to see the truth even if it broke my heart. The bank opened at 9:00. I was there at 8:55 waiting in my car with Mr. Heron on speakerphone. "You ready?" he asked. I looked at the folder on my passenger seat. Inside was everything I needed. My identification account numbers, a list of every card Kyle had access to, and a printed copy of the email. Mr. Harlan had shown me about the guardianship checklist. "I'm ready," I said. "Remember, mister," Harlan continued, "you're not doing anything wrong. You're protecting your assets. If anyone questions your capacity to make these decisions, that's when you call me. Understood, understood." I walked into the bank with my shoulders back and my expression calm. The kind of calm that comes from knowing exactly what you need to do and refusing to apologize for it. The branch manager, a woman named Patricia, who'd helped me set up my accounts after Frank died, greeted me warmly. "Mrs. Mercer, good morning. What can we help you with today? I need to make some changes to my accounts," I said simply. "I'd like to remove an authorized user, replace my cards, and set up alerts for any unusual activity." Patricia nodded and gestured toward her office. "Of course, let's sit down and take care of that for you." For the next 40 minutes, we went through everything methodically. Kyle's name came off every account. His access was revoked. His ability to view balances, make transfers, or authorize charges disappeared with a few keystrokes. Patricia ordered new cards for me with different numbers. She set up text alerts so I'd be notified immediately if anyone tried to use my information. She added extra security questions that only I would know the answers to. And then she did something I hadn't thought to ask for. "Mrs. Mercer," she said carefully, "given what you've told me, I'd also recommend placing a credit freeze and a fraud alert. It prevents anyone from opening new accounts or lines of credit in your name without your direct in-person approval." I stared at her. "Can they do that? Open accounts in my name?" Patricia's expression softened. "It happens more often than you'd think, especially in family situations. This way, if anyone tries, the request gets flagged and sent to you for verification. Do it," I said. By the time I left the bank, Kyle couldn't access a single dollar of my money. Not through cards, not through transfers, not through any loophole I hadn't considered. It felt like locking a door I should have secured years ago. My next stop was the hardware store. I picked up extra batteries for my doorbell cameras and a small fireproof safe for my important documents. Then I drove home, checked the camera angles, and made sure every entry point to my house was covered. I wasn't being paranoid. I was being prepared. At 11:30, my phone rang. Kyle. I let it ring 3 times before I answered. "Hello, Mom." His voice was tight controlled. "What did you do?" I protected myself, I said calmly. "The bank just called me," he said. "They said my access was removed. Why would you do that without talking to me first?" I almost laughed. "Kyle, when did you talk to me before you spent $4,000 on my card, Silence?" "That's different," he said finally. "You gave me access." "I gave you access for groceries," I replied. "Not for boutique shopping and event deposits, and certainly not to fund a Christmas I'm apparently not invited to." His tone shifted softer now. The voice he used when he wanted something. "Mom, come on, don't be like this. Brittany was just upset. She didn't mean what she said. She texted it," I said, "in writing. And you didn't correct her. You didn't defend me. You just let her say I wasn't needed. She was emotional." Kyle tried. "The holidays are stressful." "Then she should be relieved," I said, "because now she doesn't have to stress about my involvement or my money. Mom, please." "We can talk about this." "We are talking about it," I said, "and I'm telling you the same thing Brittany told me. You don't need me, so you won't be using me." I ended the call before he could respond. 10 minutes later, my phone rang again. This time it was Brittany. I answered on the second ring. "Yes, what the hell did you do?" Her voice wasn't soft. It wasn't careful. It was the voice she'd been hiding behind fake smiles for 7 years. "I took your advice." I said, "You told me you don't need me, so I made sure you couldn't use me. You can't just cut us off," she snapped. "We have bills, we have commitments." "That sounds like a you problem," I replied. Brittany's voice went cold. "You're going to regret this." "Probably not," I said, "but we'll see." "You're making a huge mistake," she hissed. "Kyle is your only son. You're going to lose him over this." I took a slow breath. "Brittany, if the only way to keep my son is to let you steal from me, then I've already lost him." "You just made it obvious." She started to say something else, but I hung up. My hands were steady. My heartbeat was calm. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel guilty for setting a boundary. I spent the rest of the afternoon organizing my documents. I made copies of everything. The bank statements showing the unauthorized charges, the text messages, the email about the guardianship checklist, the timeline of every request, every guilt trip, every moment I'd been treated like an obligation instead of a person. I labeled each folder clearly and stored them in the fireproof safe. If this escalated, I wanted evidence that couldn't be argued away or reframed as confusion. At 3:15, my phone buzzed again. Another call from Kyle. I didn't answer. Then a text. "Mom, please. Can we just talk in person?" I typed back one sentence. "You said you don't need me. That includes my time." I didn't hear from them again for the rest of the afternoon. By 5:00, I was sitting in my living room with a cup of tea, feeling something I hadn't felt in months. Peace. Not happiness, not satisfaction. Just the quiet, steady peace that comes from knowing you've stopped letting people hurt you. And then, at 5:43, my phone lit up with a notification from my doorbell camera. Motion detected at front door. I opened the app and felt my stomach tighten. Kyle was standing on my porch. Brittany was beside him, arms crossed, expression hard. And behind them, slightly to the left, was a man in a suit holding a folder. I didn't recognize him, but I recognized the look on his face. Professional, detached, the kind of look that comes from people who get paid to make uncomfortable conversations sound reasonable. I watched through the camera as Brittany stepped forward and pressed the doorbell. The chime echoed through my house. I didn't move. She pressed it again, longer this time. Kyle leaned toward the camera. "Mom, we know you're home. Open the door." I set my tea down carefully and picked up my phone because whatever was about to happen, I wanted it recorded. I stood in my living room, phone in hand, watching the three of them through my doorbell camera. Kyle looked uncomfortable. His hands were shoved in his pockets, and he kept glancing at Brittany like he was waiting for permission to speak. Brittany looked furious. Her jaw was tight, her arms crossed, and every few seconds she'd look directly at the camera with an expression that said she knew I was watching. But it was the man in the suit who made my pulse quicken. He stood slightly behind them, calm and composed, holding a leather folder against his chest. He wasn't looking at the camera. He was looking at my front door like he was already planning what he'd say when I opened it. Brittany pressed the doorbell again. I didn't move. Kyle leaned closer to the camera. "Mom, please. We just want to talk." I tapped the intercom button on my phone. My voice came through the speaker by the door, clear and steady. "What do you want?" All three of them looked up at the camera. Brittany spoke first. "We're coming in, Diane." "No. I said you're not." Kyle stepped forward, his tone softer now. "Mom, can we just talk in person, please? We are talking," I replied. "And you can say whatever you need to say from where you're standing." The man in the suit cleared his throat. He had the kind of voice that was designed to sound reasonable, warm, even the voice of someone who wanted you to trust him. "Mrs. Mercer," he said, tilting his head slightly toward the camera. "My name is Richard Calloway. I'm an attorney. Your son and daughter-in-law asked me to come by because they're concerned about some recent decisions you've made." I felt my chest tighten, but I kept my voice level. "I didn't ask for your concern or your visit." Richard smiled. It was the kind of smile that didn't reach his eyes. "I understand this might feel intrusive, but when family members notice changes in behavior or judgment, it's important to address those concerns before they become more serious." There it was, the language Mr. Harland had warned me about. Changes in behavior judgment serious. He wasn't here to help me. He was here to build a case. "My behavior hasn't changed," I said calmly. "I made a financial decision to protect myself. That's not confusion. That's clarity." Brittany's voice cut through. "You cut off your own son, Diane. That's not clarity. That's paranoia." "I removed access from someone who was using my accounts without permission," I corrected. "That's called boundaries." Kyle shifted his weight. "Mom, you're misunderstanding what happened. We weren't trying to hide anything. We were planning a surprise. A $4,000 surprise I said that I wasn't invited to. Richard raised a hand gently like he was calming a child. Mrs. Mercer? I think there's been some miscommunication here. Your family is worried. They care about you. And sometimes when we're under stress or feeling isolated, we can make decisions that don't reflect our best interests. I stared at the camera feed, watching him deliver his lines with practiced ease. Stress-isolated decisions that don't reflect our best interests. Every word was carefully chosen. Every phrase designed to plant doubt. Mr. Calloway. I said, my voice colder now. I'm 72, not 72, and incapable. I managed a business for 30 years. I handled my husband's estate after he passed, and I'm fully aware of what you're trying to do. His smile didn't falter. I'm simply here to make sure you're safe and supported. Then you can leave, I said, because I'm both. Brittany stepped forward, her voice rising. Stop being ridiculous and open the door. We're not leaving until we talk to you face to face. Yes, you are, I replied. Kyle's voice cracked slightly. Mom, please just let us in. We're not trying to hurt you. Then why did you bring a lawyer to my house? I asked. He opened his mouth, then closed it. He didn't have an answer, because the truth was obvious. They hadn't come to talk. They'd come to intimidate, to corner me, to make me feel like I was the one acting unreasonably. So I'd back down and give them what they wanted. But I'd spent too many years backing down, and I was done. Richard took a step closer to the door. Mrs. Mercer, I understand you're feeling defensive, but refusing to engage with your family could be seen as a sign that you're not thinking clearly. There it was, again, not thinking clearly. I took a slow breath. Mr. Calloway, I'm going to say this once. You don't enter my home. You don't have my permission to be here. And if you don't leave in the next 60 seconds, I'm calling the police. Brittany laughed. It was sharp and ugly. Go ahead, call them. They'll see exactly what we're seeing. A confused old woman who's cutting off her family for no reason. Kyle looked at her startled. Brittany. She ignored him. Her eyes were locked on the camera. And for the first time, I saw what she really thought of me. Not as Kyle's mother, not as a person, as an obstacle. Richard held up a hand, his tone still calm. Mrs. Mercer, there's no need for police. We're simply concerned family members checking on a loved one. You're trespassing, I said, and I'm giving you one more chance to leave voluntarily. Brittany's face twisted into something close to a smirk. You really think calling the cops is going to make you look good? A woman your age locked in her house refusing to talk to her own son? They're going to think exactly what we think. Kyle looked pale now. Brittany, maybe we should just go. No, she snapped. She doesn't get to shut us out and act like we're the problem. I tapped the screen on my phone and pulled up the emergency dial. I'm calling now, I said. Brittany's smirk widened. Good. Let them see what you're really like. And that's when I realized something that made my hands go cold. She wasn't afraid of the police. She wanted them to come because she thought they'd take her side. She thought they'd see a frail old woman acting erratically and a concerned family trying to help. She thought this was another move in whatever plan she'd been building. She thought I'd fold the moment authorities showed up. But what Brittany didn't know, what she couldn't have known, was that I'd been preparing for this exact moment since the day I met with Mr. Heron. I had documentation, I had evidence, and I had a lawyer who told me exactly what to say. So I pressed the call button, kept my eyes on the camera, and waited for the dispatcher to pick up. Kyle looked at Brittany, his face tight with worry. This is bad. This is really bad. Brittany didn't look worried at all. She looked triumphant. And that was the moment I knew this wasn't going to end with a conversation. It was going to end with a choice, theirs or mine. And I'd already made mine. The dispatcher's voice was calm and professional. 911. What's your emergency? This is Diane Mercer. I'm at 4782 East Saguaro Lane in Scottsdale. There are 3 people on my front porch refusing to leave my property. I've asked them to go multiple times and they're refusing. Are you in immediate danger, ma'am? I'm inside my home. They're outside, but one of them is an attorney, and they're using language that feels threatening. I'd like an officer to come and help them understand they need to leave. Are any of these people family members? I hesitated, then answered truthfully, one is my son. One is my daughter-in-law. The third is a lawyer they brought without my knowledge or consent. There was a pause. Officers are on the way, ma'am. Stay inside and keep your doors locked. Thank you. I hung up and kept watching the camera feed. Brittany was still staring at the lens, arms crossed. Kyle had moved back a step, his face pale. Richard was speaking quietly to them, though I couldn't hear what he was saying. 12 minutes later, a patrol car pulled up to the curb. 2 officers stepped out. One was older, probably in his 50s, with the kind of steady presence that comes from years of handling situations exactly like this. The other was younger, a woman with her hair pulled back tight, her expression neutral but attentive. They approached the porch, and I watched through the camera as Brittany's entire demeanor shifted. The hard edge disappeared. Her arms uncrossed, her face softened into something that looked like worry. She was performing. The older officer spoke first. Good evening. We got a call about a disturbance. Can someone tell me what's going on here? Brittany stepped forward immediately, her voice trembling just enough to sound genuine. Officer, thank goodness you're here. We're so worried about her. She pointed at my front door like I was some dangerous presence lurking inside. This is my mother-in-law, Brittany continued, her tone dripping with concern. She's been acting really strange lately, erratic. She cut off all contact with us, froze our access to accounts we've been helping her manage, and now she's locked herself inside and won't even talk to us. Kyle nodded, his voice quieter. We're just trying to make sure she's okay. We brought an attorney because we're concerned about her ability to make sound decisions right now. Richard, the lawyer, stepped forward with a calm, measured tone. Officers, I'm Richard Calloway. I specialize in elder law. The family contacted me because they've noticed some troubling changes. Paranoia, isolation, financial decisions that don't make sense. We're here to check on Mrs. Mercer's well-being. The older officer looked at the door, then back at them. Has Mrs. Mercer expressed that she wants you to leave? Brittany's eyes flickered just for a second. She's not thinking clearly. That's the whole point. That's not what I asked, the officer said. Before anyone could answer, I pressed the intercom button. Officers, this is Diane Mercer. I'm the homeowner. I'm inside and I'm safe. I did not invite these people to my property. I've asked them to leave multiple times and they've refused. The older officer stepped closer to the door. Mrs. Mercer, can you come to the door so we can speak with you in person? Yes, I said. Give me one moment. I grabbed my phone, made sure the recording was still running, and walked to the front door. I unlocked it but kept the security chain in place. Then I opened it just enough to see the officers clearly. The older officer looked at me, his eyes scanning my face. Not with suspicion, with assessment. I met his gaze directly. Good evening, officers. Thank you for coming. Mrs. Mercer, he said, your family says they're concerned about you. They mentioned some recent behavior that's worrying them. I nodded. I understand that's what they told you, but I'd like to show you something. I held up my phone and pulled up the text message from Brittany, the one from December 20th. This is a message my daughter-in-law sent me yesterday, I said, turning the screen toward him. It says, we're not celebrating Christmas with you this year. We don't need you. The officer leaned in slightly, reading the message. I continued, my voice calm and clear. After I received that text, I made a financial decision. I removed their access to my bank accounts, which they had been using without my permission to make purchases I didn't authorize. I also canceled a meeting with my attorney, where they were trying to get me to sign documents that would have given them control over my assets. I looked at Brittany, then back at the officer. They didn't come here because they're worried about me. They came here because I stopped letting them use my money. Brittany's voice rose, the careful tone slipping. That's not true. We were helping you. You asked us to. I asked Kyle to buy groceries, I said. I didn't ask you to spend $4,000 on event deposits and boutique shopping. The younger officer spoke up, her tone measured. Mrs. Mercer, do you feel safe right now? I feel safe inside my home, I replied. I do not feel safe with them on my property, which is why I called. The older officer turned to Brittany, Kyle, and Richard. Mrs. Mercer has asked you to leave. You need to go. Brittany's composure cracked. You're not listening. She's not well. She's confused. She's making decisions that are going to hurt her. Ma'am, the officer said, his voice firm now. Mrs. Mercer is lucid, coherent, and clearly able to communicate her wishes. She doesn't want you here. You need to leave now. Richard stepped forward, his voice still calm. Officer, with all due respect, we have legitimate concerns about Mrs. Mercer's capacity to make informed decisions. Then you take those concerns through the proper legal channels, the older officer replied. But you don't do it by showing up uninvited and refusing to leave when asked. That's trespassing. Kyle's face went pale. He looked at Brittany, then at the officers. We didn't mean for it to go like this. Then you should have left when she asked, the younger officer said. Brittany's jaw tightened. For a moment, she looked like she wanted to argue further, but the older officer's expression made it clear the conversation was over. You need to leave now, he repeated. If you come back without Mrs. Mercer's permission, you'll be arrested. Brittany's eyes flashed with something ugly. She turned toward the camera one last time, her voice tight. This isn't over, Diane. Yes, it is, I said quietly. Kyle looked like he wanted to say something, but Brittany grabbed his arm and pulled him toward the driveway. Richard followed his expression unreadable. The officers waited until all three of them were in their cars and driving away before turning back to me. Mrs. Mercer, the older officer said, are you sure you're okay? Do you need anything? I'm fine, I said. Thank you for your help. He handed me a card. If they come back, call us immediately. And if you need to document any of this for legal purposes, ask for a copy of tonight's report. I will, I said. Thank you. After they left, I closed the door, locked it, and stood in my entryway for a long moment. My hands were steady, my breathing was calm, and I felt something I hadn't expected. Relief. Because I'd been right. I'd stayed calm, presented facts, and the officers had seen exactly what was happening. Brittany's performance hadn't worked. Kyle's worry hadn't swayed them, and Richard's professional concern had been dismissed for what it was an attempt to intimidate. I walked back to the living room, sat down, and exhaled slowly. It was over, or so I thought. At 7:30 that evening, my phone rang. The number was local but unfamiliar, I answered cautiously. Hello, Mrs. Mercer. This is Sandra Puett from Adult Protective Services. I'm calling because we received a report of concern regarding your welfare. I'd like to schedule a time to meet with you and conduct a wellness check. My stomach dropped. Someone had filed a report and I had a pretty good idea who. I kept my voice steady. A wellness check. Of course. When would you like to meet? Sandra's tone was professional, but not unkind. Would tomorrow morning work around 10 Cindros? That's fine, I said. I'll be home. Perfect. I'll see you then, Mrs. Mercer. After she hung up, I sat on my couch and stared at my phone. They'd done it. Brittany and Kyle had filed a report claiming I was incapable, confused, or worse, and now a government caseworker was coming to evaluate whether I needed intervention. For a moment, I felt the weight of it, the audacity, the manipulation. Then I felt something else. clarity. Because if they wanted to play this game, I'd already prepared for it. I called Mr. Heron. He answered on the second ring. Diane, what happened? Adult Protective Services just called. Someone filed a report. They're coming tomorrow at 10:00 for a wellness check. There was a pause. Brittany and Kyle. Who else? I said. Mr. Harlan's voice was calm. Okay, here's what you do. Welcome the caseworker. Answer every question honestly and completely. Show them your home. Show them your documents. Show them you're organized, coherent, and fully capable. And most importantly, tell them the truth about what's been happening. What if they don't believe me? I asked. They will, he said, because you have evidence. And people who file false reports usually don't expect the person they're targeting to be prepared. That night, I didn't sleep much. Not because I was afraid, because I was getting ready. I cleaned my kitchen until it gleamed. I organized the folders on my dining room table, bank statements, text messages, the doorbell footage, the police report number from earlier. I laid out my medications in their labeled containers to show I was managing them correctly. I made a fresh pot of coffee and set out 2 cups. By 9:45 the next morning, I was dressed neatly, my hair brushed, my house spotless. When the doorbell rang at exactly 10:00, I opened the door with a calm smile. Sandra Pewitt was in her early 40s with kind eyes and a clipboard. She wore a lanyard with her credentials and carried a leather bag over her shoulder. Mrs. Mercer, she said. Yes, please come in. She stepped inside, her eyes scanning the entryway, the living room, the organized space. I could see her taking mental notes. Thank you for meeting with me, Sandra said. I know this might feel uncomfortable, but I want you to know I'm here to make sure you're safe and supported. I appreciate that, I said. Would you like to sit down? I made coffee. She smiled. That would be nice. We sat at my dining room table. I poured her a cup and set it in front of her. She took a sip, then set down her clipboard. Mrs. Mercer, I received a report of concern regarding your welfare. The person who filed it expressed worry about recent changes in your behavior and your ability to manage your affairs. Can you tell me a bit about what's been going on? I nodded. I can, and I have documentation to support everything I'm going to tell you. Sandra's eyebrows lifted slightly. Go ahead. I started from the beginning. I told her about Frank's death 6 years ago, about managing the business, the estate, the careful planning about Kyle and Brittany's increasing financial requests, about the charges I discovered on my card without authorization. Then I showed her the text message, the one from December 20th. Sandra read it, her expression neutral. And what did you do after receiving this? I responded calmly, I said. I told them that if they didn't need me, they wouldn't be using my money. Then I contacted my bank and my attorney to protect my assets. I slid the bank statements across the table, the highlighted charges clear and undeniable. Sandra studied them carefully. These charges were made without your permission. Kyle had access to one card for emergencies. He used it to spend $4,000 on event planning and personal purchases without asking me. When I questioned it, he said it was for Christmas, a Christmas I wasn't invited to. Sandra's pen moved across her notepad. I continued. Yesterday, they showed up at my house with an attorney. They refused to leave when I asked. I had to call the police. I pulled up the doorbell footage on my phone and played it for her. Sandra watched in silence as Brittany demanded entry, as Richard used language about confusion and judgment as I calmly asked them to leave. When the video ended, Sandra sat back in her chair. Mrs. Mercer, she said slowly, the report I received described you as paranoid, isolated, and making irrational financial decisions. What I'm seeing here is something very different. What are you seeing? I asked. Someone trying to protect themselves from financial exploitation, she said. I felt my chest tighten with relief. Sandra leaned forward. Can I ask you a few standard questions just to complete my assessment? Of course. She asked me about my daily routine, My medications, my ability to manage my finances, my social connections, my physical health. I answered every question, clearly referencing my calendar, my medication organizer, my bank app, my weekly lunch group with friends from my widow's support circle. Sandra made notes, nodding occasionally. Finally, she sat down her pen. Mrs. Mercer, I want to be very clear with you. Based on what I've seen today, you are fully capable of managing your own affairs. Your home is well maintained. You're organized, articulate, and coherent, and the documentation you've provided indicates that the concerns raised in the report were not accurate. I exhaled slowly. So what happens now, I'm going to close this case as unfounded, Sandra said. But I'm also going to note in my report that there are indicators of attempted financial exploitation and intimidation. If you feel unsafe, or if they escalate, you have options. She pulled a brochure from her bag and handed it to me. This has information about protective orders, legal resources, and financial abuse hotlines. You've already involved your attorney, which is good. But if anything else happens, document it and call us. Thank you, I said quietly. Sandra's expression softened. Mrs. Mercer, I see this more often than you'd think. Adult children who believe they're entitled to their parents' assets. Family members who confuse concern with control. You did the right thing by setting boundaries. After she left, I sat at my dining room table and stared at the folders in front of me. Brittany had tried to paint me as incompetent. She'd filed a report hoping a caseworker would show up, see a confused old woman, and recommend intervention. Instead, the caseworker had seen exactly what was happening, and now there was an official record that I was being targeted, not failing. I called Mr. Harland and told him everything. Perfect, he said. Keep that report number. If we need to file for a restraining order, this strengthens your case significantly. Do you think they'll try again? I asked. Probably not, he said. Because now they know you're prepared and people like Brittany don't like fair fights. That evening, I made myself dinner, poured a glass of wine, and sat by the window watching the sun set over the desert. My phone buzzed at 8:15. Kyle. I almost didn't answer, but something in me wanted to hear his voice, wanted to know if he understood yet what he'd been part of. Hello, I said. His voice was tight-strained. Mom, we need to talk about what I asked. There was a long pause. Then quietly, almost desperately, he said, we're in trouble. I didn't say anything. The caseworker, Kyle, continued his words, coming faster now. She didn't see what Brittany thought she'd see. And now there's a report that says we were trying to exploit you. I took a sip of wine. Were you? No, he said quickly. I mean, I don't know, Mom. Brittany said it was just precautions. She said we were protecting you, from what I asked. He didn't answer. Kyle, I said softly, you brought a lawyer to my house. You filed a false report with a government agency. You let your wife text me that I wasn't needed, then showed up demanding access to my home and my money. What did you think was going to happen? His voice cracked. I thought you'd understand. I thought you'd see we were trying to help. Help yourselves, I corrected. Silence. Mom, please, he whispered. We have bills. We have deposits due. We're going to lose everything. And there it was, the real reason for the call. Not apology, not accountability, panic because the money had stopped. And now the consequences were coming due. I set my wine glass down and looked out at the darkening sky. Kyle, I said quietly, what bills? What deposits? He didn't answer right away. I could hear him breathing on the other end. The kind of breathing that comes when you're trying to decide how much truth to tell. The house, he said finally. We're behind and there's a deposit for a venue for a party Brittany planned, and the credit cards Mom were maxed out. I closed my eyes. When were you planning to tell me this? I wasn't, he admitted. Brittany said we'd figure it out. She said once the signing happened, we'd have access to enough to cover everything and get back on track. Once the signing happened. The signing that would have given them control. The signing that was supposed to happen on December 21st. The signing I'd canneled the moment Brittany sent that text. So you weren't trying to help me, I said. You were trying to help yourselves to my money. It's not like that, Kyle said. But his voice had no strength behind it. Then what is it like? I asked. Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you and Brittany spent money you didn't have counting on me to bail you out. And when I said no, you tried to force me. He was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice was small. We thought you'd understand. You always help. I helped when you needed groceries, I said. I helped when you had an emergency. But Kyle, $4,000 in unauthorized charges isn't an emergency. It's theft. And planning to take control of my finances through legal documents isn't help. It's exploitation. Mom, please, he said, and I could hear the desperation now. We just need enough to get through this. Just enough to cover what's due. Then we'll figure out the rest. I felt a familiar pull in my chest. The pull I'd felt 100 times before. The instinct to smooth things over, to write the check, to make the problem go away, so my son wouldn't suffer. But then I remembered something. Kyle wasn't suffering because I said no. He was suffering because he'd made choices that depended on my inability to say no. Kyle, I said, my voice steady. Adults solve problems without stealing. Silence. I didn't steal, he said weakly. You took money without asking. You brought a lawyer to my door to intimidate me. You filed a false report to make me look incompetent. What do you call that? He didn't answer. Here's what's going to happen. I continued. You and Brittany are going to figure out your bills on your own. You're going to talk to the bank about your house. You're going to cancel whatever party you can't afford. And you're going to stop expecting me to fund a life you're pretending to live. Mom, we can't just cancel. Kyle said, his voice rising. We'll lose the deposit. We'll lose everything. Then you'll learn a very expensive lesson, I replied. But it won't be my lesson to pay for. Kyle's breathing quickened. You're really going to let us lose our house over this? I'm not letting you lose anything, I said. You made choices. Now you live with them. You don't understand, he said. And now there was anger creeping into his voice. You have plenty. You don't need all that money. You're just sitting on it while we're drowning. And there it was, the real belief underneath everything, that because I had money, it was somehow theirs. That because I didn't need it the way they did, I owed it to them. Kyle, I said softly, my money isn't your safety net. It's my security, and I'm not going to give that up because you and Brittany can't manage a budget. Mom, please, he whispered. I'm begging you. I felt my throat tighten, but I didn't let my voice waver. The answer is no. He hung up without another word. I sat there, in the silence, my phone still in my hand, and felt the weight of what I'd just done. I'd said no firmly, finally, without apology. And it hurt not because I regretted it, but because it meant acknowledging that my son had become someone I didn't recognize, someone who saw me as a resource, not a person. The next morning, I called Mr. Harlan. I need to take the next step, I said. What happened? He asked. I told him about Kyle's call, about the bills, the deposits, the admission that they'd been counting on my money all along. Mr. Harlan was quiet for a moment. Then he said, Diane, I think it's time to file for formal protection, a restraining order and documentation that clearly establishes boundaries. Will that make things worse? I asked. It'll make things clear, he said, right now. They think if they push hard enough, you'll give in. A court order removes that hope. Do it, I said. That afternoon, Mr. Harlan prepared the paperwork, a request for a restraining order based on intimidation, attempted financial coercion, and the false APS report. He included the text message, the doorbell footage, the police report, and the caseworker's findings. This should be straightforward. He said, "You have clear evidence, and the fact that they escalated to a wellness check after being told to leave shows a pattern. When will the hearing be?" I asked. "Probably within the week," he said. "I'll push for expedited scheduling given the circumstances." I spent the rest of the day trying to keep my mind occupied. I went to the grocery store. I returned emails. I watered my plants. But underneath everything was a low hum of anxiety. Not about the hearing, about what came after. Because I knew Brittany, and I knew that when someone like her got cornered, they didn't back down gracefully. They escalated. At 4:30 in the afternoon, my phone rang. It was Mr. Heron. "Diane," he said, his tone serious, "I just got notification. Brittany's attorney filed something this morning." My stomach dropped. Filed what? A petition for emergency guardianship. He said, "They're claiming you're a danger to yourself due to diminished capacity and recent erratic behavior." I felt the room tilt. "They're trying to take control," Mr. Harlan continued. "Before you can get a restraining order, they're trying to have you declared incompetent." I sat down slowly, my hands shaking. "Can they do that?" "They can file," he said, "but they won't win. Not with the evidence we have. The APS report alone contradicts their claims." "But Diane, this means we're going to court and it's going to be public." I took a slow breath. When hearing is set for December 23rd, days before Christmas. I closed my eyes. Brittany wasn't backing down. She was doubling down. And now, instead of a quiet resolution, this was going to become a fight where my capacity, my judgment, and my entire life would be scrutinized in a courtroom. "What do I need to do?" I asked. "Be ready to tell the truth," Mr. Harlan said, "and trust that the truth is enough." I hung up and sat in my quiet living room staring at the wall. In 2 days, I'd be standing in front of a judge defending my right to control my own life, and my son and his wife would be sitting across from me trying to take it away. Before I could stop myself, I thought about Frank, about what he would say if he were here. And I knew exactly what he'd say. "Fight, Diane. Fight like hell." So that's what I was going to do. December 23rd arrived cold and clear. I dressed carefully that morning. A navy blue suit, Frank had always said, made me look professional. Simple earrings, minimal makeup. I wanted to look like exactly what I was, a 72-year-old woman who had her life together. Mr. Harlan picked me up at 8:15. We didn't talk much during the drive to the courthouse. He'd already briefed me twice on what to expect, what questions might come, how to stay calm no matter what Brittany or her attorney said. Remember, he told me as we parked, "This isn't about winning an argument. It's about presenting facts. Let the evidence speak." I nodded, gripping my folder of documents. The courtroom was smaller than I'd imagined. Wood paneling, fluorescent lights, rows of benches that reminded me of church pews. The judge's bench sat elevated at the front, empty for now. We took our seats on the left side. Moments later, the door opened and Brittany walked in with Richard Calloway, the attorney, from my porch. She was dressed like she was going to a funeral. Black dress, understated jewelry, her face arranged in an expression of deep concern. She didn't look at me as she sat down on the opposite side of the courtroom. Kyle arrived a few minutes later alone. He looked terrible. His suit was wrinkled. His face was drawn. He slid into the bench behind Brittany but didn't sit next to her. That told me something. At exactly 9:00, the bailiff called the room to order. All rise. The Honorable Judge Patricia Brennan presiding. Judge Brennan was in her early 60s with sharp eyes and an expression that suggested she'd heard every story twice. She settled into her chair, opened a file, and looked at both sides of the courtroom. "This is an emergency hearing regarding a petition for guardianship filed by Brittany Mercer on behalf of Diane Mercer. I've reviewed the petition and the opposition. Mr. Stam Calloway, you filed the petition. Proceed. Richard stood his voice smooth and practiced. Thank you, Your Honor. My client, Brittany Mercer, is deeply concerned about her mother-in-law, Diane Mercer. Over the past several weeks, Mrs. Mercer has exhibited troubling behavior. She's isolated herself from family. She's made sudden, irrational financial decisions. She's refused help from loved ones who only want to ensure her safety and well-being. Judge Brennan looked at him. What specific behavior are you referring to? She abruptly cut off her son's access to accounts he'd been helping her manage. She canceled an important legal meeting without explanation. And when family members attempted to check on her welfare, she called the police and refused to speak with them. The judge made a note. Anything else? Yes, Your Honor. Mrs. Mercer has become increasingly paranoid, accusing family members of theft when they were simply assisting with household expenses as they've done for years. Judge Brennan turned to Mr. Harland. And your response? Mr. Harland stood his tone measured. Your Honor, Mrs. Mercer is not incapacitated. She is protecting herself from financial exploitation. We have extensive documentation to support this, including unauthorized charges, attempts to gain legal control over her assets, and a fraudulent report filed with Adult Protective Services. The judge nodded slowly. Let's start with Mrs. Mercer. Mrs. Mercer, please approach. I stood and walked to the witness stand. The bailiff asked me to state my name, and I did so clearly. Judge Brennan looked at me directly. Mrs. Mercer, can you tell me in your own words what's been happening? I took a breath. Your Honor, on December 20th. My daughter-in-law sent me a text message. It said, "We're not celebrating Christmas with you this year. We don't need you." After I received that message, I made a decision to remove her and my son's access to my financial accounts because they'd been using my credit card without permission. What kind of charges? The judge asked. Over $4,000. Boutique purchases, spa packages, event deposits. I'd given my son access to one card for emergencies, but they used it for personal expenses without asking me. Judge Brennan's pen moved across her notepad. And the legal meeting you canceled. I was scheduled to sign a document that would have given my son limited power of attorney, but my attorney discovered that the paperwork included language allowing my son to delegate that authority to his wife. I canceled the meeting because I realized I was being positioned to lose control of my own assets. The judge looked at Brittany. Mrs. Mercer, the younger, you sent that text message on December the 20th. Brittany stood her voice soft. Yes, Your Honor, but it wasn't meant the way Diane is describing it. We were just trying to have a quieter Christmas. She's been so controlling about the holidays, and we needed space. Judge Brennan's expression didn't change. You told a 72-year-old widow that you don't need her, and you expected that to be received as a request for space. Brittany hesitated. It came out wrong. I was emotional. Were you emotional when you filed a report with Adult Protective Services claiming she was incapacitated? The judge asked. Brittany's face tightened. We were concerned. She was acting irrationally. According to the APS case, workers report Judge Brennan said, flipping through her file, Mrs. Mercer was found to be fully capable, organized, and coherent. The caseworker noted indicators of attempted financial exploitation and intimidation. Does that sound irrational to you? Brittany opened her mouth, then closed it. Richard jumped in. Your Honor, the family was simply trying to protect Mrs. Mercer from making decisions that could harm her financially by taking control of her finances, the judge asked. By ensuring she had support, Richard said smoothly. Judge Brennan turned back to me. Mrs. Mercer, do you have the text message? Yes, Your Honor. I handed my phone to the bailiff who passed it to the judge. She read it in silence. Then she looked at Brittany. "Mrs. Mercer, did you write this?" "Yes," Brittany said quietly. "And what did you mean by, 'we don't need you'?" Brittany's voice wavered. "I meant we didn't need her to host Christmas." "That's not what you wrote," the judge said. "You wrote, 'we don't need you.' Not 'we don't need you' to host, just 'we don't need you.'" The courtroom was silent. Judge Brennan set the phone down. "Mr. Heron, you mentioned additional evidence." Mr. Harlan stood. "Yes, Your Honor." Doorbell camera footage showing the family arriving with an attorney and refusing to leave when asked. A police report documenting the incident bank records, showing unauthorized charges, and the APS report clearing Mrs. Mercer of any concerns. He handed everything to the bailiff. Judge Brennan reviewed each document carefully. When she looked up, her expression was firm. "I'm denying the petition for guardianship," she said. "Mrs. Mercer has clearly demonstrated capacity. The evidence suggests the concerns raised were not about her well-being, but about access to her assets." Brittany's face went pale. Kyle looked at the floor. The judge continued. "Furthermore, I'm granting Mrs. Mercer's request for a protective order. Mrs. Brittany Mercer and Mr. Kyle Mercer are prohibited from contacting Mrs. Diane Mercer or coming within 500 FT of her residence for a period of 6 months." She paused, her tone sharpening, "and I'm referring this matter to the appropriate office for review. The financial pattern documented here suggests possible elder exploitation and that warrants further investigation." Brittany's eyes went wide. Richard leaned over, whispering urgently. Judge Brennan looked at me. "Mrs. Mercer, if you experience any further contact or harassment, you call the police immediately." "Understood." "Yes, Your Honor," I said. "This hearing is adjourned." The gavel came down. I stood slowly, my legs shaking. Mr. Harlan put a hand on my shoulder. "You did it." Across the courtroom, Brittany was speaking rapidly to Richard, her face twisted with anger. Kyle sat frozen, staring at nothing. As I walked toward the exit, Kyle looked up. Our eyes met for just a moment. He looked devastated, but I couldn't carry that for him anymore. I walked out of the courtroom into the cold December air and felt something I hadn't felt in years. Free. Mr. Harlan drove me home from the courthouse in silence. Not because there was nothing to say, but because sometimes silence is the only thing that fits. When we pulled into my driveway, he turned to me. "How are you feeling?" I thought about it. "Tired, relieved, sad?" He nodded. "That's normal. You just fought for your right to exist on your own terms. That takes something out of you." "It does," I agreed. "What are you doing for Christmas?" he asked. I looked at my house, quiet and still in the afternoon light. "I don't know yet." He smiled gently. "Figure it out. You deserve a good one." After he left, I sat in my living room and stared at the small tree in the corner. I'd put it up weeks ago, back when I still thought I'd be spending Christmas with Kyle and Brittany, back when I still believed we were a family. Now it just looked sad. A prop for a holiday that wasn't going to happen the way I'd imagined. But then I thought about something Sandra, the APS caseworker, had said. "You've already involved your attorney, which is good, but if anything else happens, document it and call us." She hadn't said when. She'd said if. Because she knew, just like I knew now, that I had a choice. I could spend Christmas alone grieving what I'd lost, or I could build something new. I picked up my phone and scrolled through my contacts. My finger hovered over a name, Janet, my neighbor, from 2 doors down. We'd waved to each other for years, exchanged pleasantries about the weather, but never really connected beyond that. I typed a message before I could talk myself out of it. "Hi, Janet, this is Diane from down the street. I know this is last minute, but I'm hosting a small Christmas gathering tomorrow and wondered if you'd like to join me. No pressure, just thought I'd ask." I hit send and immediately felt foolish. But 30 seconds later, my phone buzzed. "Diane, I'd love to." I was dreading spending it alone. "What time?" I smiled. "Noon. Casual. Just bring yourself." Next, I texted Margaret from my widow's group. We'd met at a support meeting 2 years ago and had stayed in loose touch meeting for lunch every few months. Margaret, are you doing anything for Christmas? I'm having a few people over if you'd like to come. Her response came quickly. I'd be honored. Thank you for thinking of me. I looked around my living room and realized something. This was going to be better. Not because I was trying to prove something, but because these were people who showed up for me without conditions. People who didn't see me as a wallet with legs. I spent the rest of the evening preparing. I pulled out Frank's old recipes. I made a shopping list. I set the table with mismatched plates that suddenly felt more honest than the matching set I used to use for Kyle and Brittany. And for the first time in weeks, I felt something close to excitement. Christmas Eve arrived quietly. I woke up early, baked rolls, prepped vegetables, and let the house fill with the smell of food that wasn't meant to impress anyone, just to nourish. At 3:00 in the afternoon, I stood in my kitchen and realized I was humming. An old song Frank used to sing while he cooked. Something about silver bells and city sidewalks. I stopped startled by my own voice. Then I kept going because grief and joy aren't opposites. They're neighbors. And sometimes they show up at the same time. That night, I sat by the window with a cup of tea and thought about Kyle. Not the man who'd stood in the courtroom looking defeated, but the boy I'd raised, the one who used to help Frank with the roofing jobs on weekends, who'd come home covered in tar, and grinning, the one who'd called me every Sunday during his first year of college just to tell me about his classes. I mourned that boy because somewhere along the way he disappeared, and the man who'd replaced him had chosen comfort over character. He'd chosen Brittany's approval over doing what was right, and that wasn't my fault. It was his choice. I felt my throat tighten, but I didn't cry. I just sat there holding the weight of it, letting myself feel the loss without letting it consume me. At 11:45, my phone buzzed. A message from Brittany. You destroyed our family. I hope you're happy. I stared at the words, feeling the familiar pull to defend myself, to explain, to argue, but I didn't. Instead, I typed one sentence. No. I stopped financing your pretending. I hit send and turned off my phone because I was done letting her rewrite the narrative. Done accepting blame for refusing to be used. I went to bed that night and slept deeply. Christmas morning arrived with clear skies and the kind of quiet that only comes a few times a year. I woke up at 7, made coffee, and stood in my kitchen looking at the food I'd prepared, the rolls, warming in the oven, the table set for 4. The small tree glowing in the corner. It wasn't the Christmas I'd planned, it was better. At 11:30, Janet arrived with a bottle of wine and a nervous smile. I hope this is okay. I wasn't sure what to bring. It's perfect, I said, welcoming her in. Margaret showed up 20 minutes later with a homemade pie and a hug that lasted longer than expected. Thank you for this, Diane. You have no idea how much I needed it. And then there was one more guest I hadn't planned for. My neighbor from across the street. Paul, an older man who'd lost his wife the year before. I'd invited him on a whim the night before, not expecting him to say yes, but he did. By noon, my house was filled with laughter. Small stories, shared memories of people we'd lost, and holidays we'd survived. Nobody asked me about Kyle. Nobody pried into why I was hosting instead of traveling. They just showed up, and that was enough. At one point, Margaret raised her glass to Diane for reminding us that family isn't always blood. Sometimes it's the people who choose to show up. We clinked glasses, and I felt something crack open in my chest. Not sadness, relief, because I'd spent so many years trying to hold together a version of family that only existed in my imagination. And now sitting at this mismatched table with people who genuinely wanted to be here, I realized what I'd been missing. Connection without conditions, love without transactions, presence without price tags. After dinner, we sat in the living room exchanging small gifts. Nothing expensive, just thoughtful gestures. A book Margaret thought I'd like, a candle from Janet, a box of chocolates from Paul. I hadn't expected gifts, but I'd prepared small things just in case. A scarf for Margaret, a plant for Janet, a bottle of whiskey for Paul. It was simple, honest, real. By 4:00, everyone had left and my house was quiet again. But it wasn't the lonely kind of quiet. It was the kind that comes after something meaningful, after connection, after choosing yourself without apology. I cleaned up, slowly washing dishes and humming that same song from the night before. And then just as I was drying the last plate, I heard it. A knock at the door. I froze. It was Christmas evening. Everyone I'd invited had already left. I walked slowly to the door and checked the camera feed on my phone. Kyle was standing on my porch alone. No Brittany, no attorney, no folder, just my son holding a small wrapped package, his face drawn and tired, and something else I couldn't quite name. Vulnerable. I stared at the screen, my hand hovering over the lock, and I realized this was the moment everything had been leading to. Not the courtroom, not the protective order, not even Brittany's angry text. This the moment where my son showed up without his handler, and I had to decide if there was anything left worth saving. I took a slow breath, then I opened the door. Kyle stood on my porch, red-eyed and trembling slightly in the evening cold. He looked like he hadn't slept in days. The small wrapped package in his hands was shaking. "Mom," he said quietly, "can I come in?" I didn't move aside immediately. "What happened?" He swallowed hard. "Brittany said, if I came here, I was choosing you over her." And I asked, my hand still on the door frame. Kyle's voice cracked. "I told her she doesn't get to make me choose. Not like that. Not after what she did." I studied his face. For the first time in years, he wasn't looking past me or around me or through me. He was looking at me, really looking. And I saw something I hadn't seen since he was a boy. Fear, not of me, of himself, of what he'd become. I stepped aside. "Come in." Kyle walked into my warm living room and stopped staring at the simple tree, the mismatched plate still on the counter, the half-empty pie on the table. "You had people over," he said softly. "I did," I replied. He looked around like he was seeing my house for the first time. "It feels real." "It is," I said. He handed me the small package. His hands were shaking worse now. "I brought you something." I unwrapped it carefully. Inside was a framed photograph. Frank and me, years ago, standing on a beach in San Diego. We were laughing, his arm around my shoulders. The ocean behind us. I hadn't seen this photo in years. I'd forgotten it existed. "Where did you get this?" I whispered. "I found it in some old boxes at my place," Kyle said, "from when Dad died and we were sorting through stuff. I kept it because it reminded me of who you were, who we were before everything got so complicated." I set the frame down carefully, my throat tight. Kyle's voice broke. "Mom, I'm sorry." I didn't let him rush past it. "Sorry for what?" He flinched like I'd struck him, but he didn't look away. "For letting her talk to you like that," he said. "For letting her use your card. For showing up at your house with that lawyer. For acting like you were the problem when you were just trying to protect yourself." He took a shaky breath. "For treating you like you'd always be there no matter what we did." That was the one that landed. I felt my chest tighten, but I kept my face calm. "Keep going." Kyle's eyes filled. "For not standing up for you. For letting Brittany file that APS report. For not stopping her when she wanted to file for guardianship. For letting it get so bad that you had to go to court to protect yourself from your own son." His voice dropped to a whisper. "And for making you feel like you weren't needed, when the truth is, You were holding everything together, and I was too weak to admit it. I nodded slowly. Do you know why her text didn't break me? Kyle looked up, waiting. Because the moment she said, "We don't need you," she told the truth. I said, "Not about me, about her. She doesn't need a mother-in-law, she needs access." And you let her believe those were the same thing. Kyle's face crumpled. I know. We stood there in silence for a long moment. What happens now? I asked. Kyle wiped his eyes. Brittany's furious. She said I betrayed her by coming here. She said if I don't leave right now and go home, she's done. And what did you say I asked? I said I needed to do this, Kyle replied. I needed to look you in the eye and tell you I was wrong. And if she can't understand that, then maybe we have bigger problems than I've been willing to admit. I searched his face. Do you love her? He hesitated. I don't know anymore. I thought I did. But I think I've been so busy trying to keep her happy that I forgot what love is supposed to feel like. What's it supposed to feel like? I asked. Kyle's voice was barely audible. Safe. Not like walking on eggshells. Not like every decision has to go through her first. Not like I'm constantly one mistake away from being punished. I felt something shift in my chest. Not forgiveness, not yet. But understanding. Kyle, I said gently, I can't fix your marriage and I can't make your choices for you, but I can tell you this. If you want me in your life again, it's going to look different. How he asked. You don't get access to my finances ever again. You don't get to make decisions about my health or my property. And you don't get to bring Brittany back into my life unless she admits what she did and means it. Kyle nodded. I understand. Do you? I asked. Because accountability isn't just apologizing, it's changing. And if you go home tonight and let her talk you into believing I'm the villain again, we're done. I won't, he said. I promise. I wanted to believe him, but I'd heard promises before. Time will tell, I said. We sat down on the couch, and for the first time in years, we talked. Really talked. Not about money or logistics or holiday plans, about Frank, about grief, about the ways we'd both failed each other. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't healed, but it was honest. And maybe that was enough for now. Before Kyle left, he stopped at the door. Mom, I don't know if I can fix this with Brittany with us, but I want you to know something. What I asked. You were right, he said about all of it. And I'm sorry it took Loing you to figure that out. After he left, I stood in my quiet house and looked at the photograph he'd given me. Frank's smile, my laugh, the ocean stretching out behind us. We'd built something good, Frank and I. Something solid, and I'd almost let someone take it apart piece by piece because I was afraid of being alone. But I wasn't alone. I was free. And there's a difference. Brittany had tried to teach me I wasn't necessary, that I could be discarded the moment I stopped being useful. Instead, she taught me something far more valuable. I was the foundation, the steady ground everything else was built on. And the moment I stepped away, everything she'd constructed on my patience, my money, my silence came crashing down under its own weight. So yes, when she texted, "We don't need you," I smiled because she didn't know what I'd planned, and by the time she realized, it was already done. I hope you found this story meaningful. If it resonated with you, or if you've ever had to set boundaries with people who were supposed to love you, drop a comment and let me know. Share this video with someone who needs to hear it. And don't forget to subscribe because we have more stories of strength, dignity, and women who refuse to be diminished. Thank you for being here. And remember, saying no to being used isn't cruelty, it's self-respect.